Hello, this is Mr. Richards, and today we're going to be talking about how to draw trees. So this is a basic procedure you can use to draw trees from the imagination. It also works well as a step-by-step process for drawing trees from observation or real life or different types. You just kind of change the procedure a little bit, and you should be able to draw all sorts of different trees with this method. So I'm going to start here by drawing an X on my page. I'm going to draw kind of a squished X so that it's a little bit wider than tall, and it's going to be where the bottom of my tree is going to go. So I only need this X if it's going to be a tree that has visible roots, and that's what this is going to turn into, but you kind of would set up where you're going to draw the base and the root structure. And if you have something with no roots on it, like a palm tree or something, you can just kind of draw straight up from here. Alright, so I'm going to add the trunk, which is going to be kind of an irregular cylinder. So with the trunk, I want it to be wider at the base than it is as it moves up. I want it to kind of taper. So it would have kind of a cylindrical top and bottom here. And you don't need to draw the top of that cylinder. I'm just kind of adding it in to show you what that cylindrical shape is. And now I'm adding the roots along the lines of the X. And that X is just to help us draw these roots so that they are foreshortened. And you don't want the roots to go straight out, you want them to kind of be thicker towards the base of the tree and get skinnier. And you can add more than the 4 that I have with the X. You can put as many roots as you want on there, or as many as you see in the tree you're drawing, but this is kind of the idea. They all radiate out from that central axis, more or less. So now I'm going to erase the top of this. You don't need to draw that. It's just showing you that it's a cylinder shape. I'm going to start adding branches from the top of the trunk. So the branches I can kind of get creative with. I can just kind of draw slowly tapering branches, and then when they actually branch off, you want each of the branches coming off to be a little bit more slender than the rest of the branch that it came from. So I can add as many of these as I want or I see in the in my subject, depending on whether I'm creating from imagination or drawing from observation. The key here is I want them to gradually get more and more slender. And you could continue this out infinitely to draw a bare tree. Eventually you probably want the branches on your bare tree get down to a single pencil stroke instead of trying to give them thickness. It'll probably give you a more sort of viable branch end. But I'm going to add leaves to this. So instead of drawing individual leaves, I'm going to draw big clusters of leaves. And these are almost spherical, but a little more organic than that, kind of like the shape of small potatoes. Like those red or yellow potatoes is how I think of it. It's like an irregular round shape. So I can kind of add these wherever. I do want to have kind of branches connecting to them in a way that makes sense. So if I want to bulk out the foliage up top, I should probably add some more branches. Alright, so we've basically got our tree sort of sketched in and planned. And now we're going to kind of get into the final construction. All of these steps I'd want to do really light. I do them a little darker in the demo than I would normally do them, just so that they are visible on camera. But you only want to sketch this stuff so far dark enough so that you can see it. So now I'm going to shade everything. I'm going to shade before I add my contours. So if I have the light coming this way, I want to shade everything that's either facing to the right or facing down. We're going to assume that the light is kind of higher in the sky. So I just shade the opposite side. I'm shading the right-hand side. So if you're drawing from observation, you can be really specific with this, really get where the shadows are. You'll hopefully be able to see them and get a little more accuracy. But we're just kind of inventing today, so just try to do your best to make some logical shadows on here. So I'm shading under the roots, just on the underside. And every part of it that I give a little bit of shadow to, I'm also giving it form. I'm making it feel a little more three-dimensional. This is a good time to also come in and erase out some of my sketch lines or add some highlights if I've got some lines in places I don't want them to be. Now I'm going to shade these clumps of leaves as if they're like a single form, basically. So these are basically like a round or egg shape, so I want to have a gradation, ideally going from dark to light. But even adding just a little bit of shadow on the darkest spots can help give this a lot more form than it has if I don't add that. So I tend to do the shadow on this before I lay in like the final contours and details. And the reason for that is during your shading phase, you're likely to kind of smudge things. And I don't want to really smudge those final contour lines or those details. I want to be really careful once I get those going. I can erase out where I'm overlapping with the leaf clumps. So now I've got kind of a shadowed, out of focus tree. So now I want to bring it into focus. I want to add the details to it. So I'm going to reestablish my contour lines. I'm going to go a little darker. I'm going to start up in the leafy clumps. Instead of just drawing a straight line or a curved line, one line, I'm actually making a line using this kind of leafy pattern to define the edge of the leaf clump. And then I can come back in and add texture. So I'm going to add clumps of leaves just in various places. I don't really need to draw leaf texture all over the whole clump of leaves. I can just draw little patches, and that'll sort of imply texture all over the rest of the leaf clump. So same process sort of through here. If I wanted to, I could add more or darker textural elements to the shadowy parts of the tree, and that would help define the form and add shading. It's definitely a perfectly legitimate way to do it. Now I'm going to come in and define the contours of the trunk here. As I'm drawing this contour line, I want to think about like the texture of the bark. So I don't necessarily want a super slick, smooth line. I can make it a little more jagged and shaky. I'm adding a knot to the tree right here. I just draw a foreshortened circle and add some thickness to it and attach it to the tree. Alright, so I get that contour line all over the outside. Now I'm going to go back in and add texture to the trunk. These are just sort of cross contours basically, but they're going lengthwise. And I want to think about that bark texture as I draw them in. I want to be kind of shaky, kind of rough. And that's pretty much how I draw my tree. This lesson came from Mark Kistler's book, You Can Draw in 30 Days. I have a couple of sketchbook lessons for art one I do out of there. So it's highly recommended if you're into drawing stuff like this. You want to learn how to draw some things really well and show up your skills. I also get a lot of influence in the way I kind of break down these Art One Sketchbook projects from there, so you should definitely check it out if you're interested. Alright, so your sketchbook assignment for this week is going to be to draw 3 trees from your imagination. I want you to think about drawing different types of trees. Don't make them all the same as this one. Think about how you might draw like a pine tree or a bonsai or something like that, and experiment a little bit. See if you can apply these techniques to kind of different trees and change them appropriately. Alright, thank you. That's it for today.